Here we go live. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Meshery Development Meeting. Today is December 7. So before we begin the call, let's have a quick introduction of newcomers. So if you are a newcomer joining this call for the first time, feel free to say hi and introduce yourself. And if you have webcams up, that are highly appreciated. So do we have a newcomer on the call?
Hi. Yes, I'm new here. My
Hi.
name is Bidemi, and I'm from Nigeria. I'm actually pretty new to Layer 5 as a whole, and I'm just trying to get my feet in. I'm a data engineer, and I have skills in Python, SQL, and databases generally. So yeah, that's pretty much all about me. Good to be here.
That's awesome. And she gets the sarcasm too, which is great. There's a lot of sarcasm that happens in the community. So awesome.
That's great, Bidemi. Thank you for introduction. So I don't think we have more newcomers today, do we? Nope. So we have Krish. So Krish, is this your first time joining this call?
No, it's not. I have been here before.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So I think we can move with agenda items. So first we have is Alpha, Aditya, on eliminating duplication in Meshery CLI reference. But I don't think we have him on the call. So we can proceed with the next topic by Abdullah. So Abdullah, would like to share your screen?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Is my screen visible?
Yep, it is.
Okay, sure. One sec. Yeah. So currently, in Meshery, there are two types of providers. We have the remote provider. Am I audible?
Yep, you are.
Yeah, okay. So in Meshery, we have two types of providers. We have the remote provider, and where you need to log in, and you have the local provider where you do not need to authenticate yourself. So it was possible to use an environment variable to enforce the kind of to enforce the provider you would like to enforce the provider to authenticate. So it was possible. Where was it? One sec. Enable. Server CMD. Yep, here it was. Yeah. So it was through this flag in the environment, it was possible to enforce the type of provider, whether remote or local. And now I've added the capability to enforce the provider through a field in the mesh config. So as an example, I have this mesh config and I've enforced the provider type of remote. And I have an existing Meshery deployment, Meshery Docker deployment running. And where is that? Yeah, it should go here. Can someone tell me how to minimize the tab on top when you're sharing your screen?
Yeah, there's like there is a particular hotkey combination on Mac. It's like on Windows, it might be the Windows Command Option H.
Command Option H. Sorry, I'm actually facing difficulty accessing my tabs up top because of the Zoom overlay.
Yeah. There's another way. Sometimes it'll let you move the dock. It'll like dock to the bottom of the screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I figured it out. Yeah. Finally. Yeah. So yeah, I have. So since I've enforced the provider type of remote, so I should not be able to access the none provider, which is the case over here. whereas I'm able to access the Meshery.io provider. Yeah, that works. And regarding some of the concerns that you've raised, so if there is no provider defined in a context, so you are able to authenticate with either the none provider, or you can use either basically. And if it is defined in one context and not defined in the other context, in that case, like it uses the current context and checks to see if there is a provider enforced or not. I've not checked the case where in a single context where there are multiple enforced providers defined. So that's it, yeah.
Right now, the way enforced provider flag works, it only like enforces one provider at a time. So if you want to enforce a provider, what the meaning was when it was introduced was to enforce, the use case was to enforce the remote provider. So the way it currently works is that you specify one provider to enforce and not multiple. If the use case, we have a use case where we want to enforce like multiple providers, which we don't have right now because we only have two providers. So that's why yeah, 1 out of 2 is.
When I checked the implementation for the environment variable, it was either remote or remote or local. Wait, let me find where that is. It was yeah, somewhere over here. Enforce provider. Yeah, so get provider type can be either remote or local. And I found that like it can be one of these two values. So for the config, I've made it so that like enforced provider can be one of these two values.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other feedback or suggestions?
Yeah, so hey, just some quick context for everyone else who may or may not be familiar, and that is that as you go to sign into Meshery, Abdullah was showing that you get a choice of what provider you'd like to sign into. There are two types of providers that Abdullah was just saying. There's a remote provider. A provider, by the way, is largely an identity provider, although providers can offer plugins, persistent storage. There's a Meshery as a platform is quite pluggable, so the providers can offer up quite a few things. So user experience will vary based on which provider is chosen. So there's two types that I was saying: the remote provider, the local provider. Anyway, point is, one of the things that a Meshery maintainer, Mario, had highlighted in the past, and a couple of other folks have as well, is that intentionally there's only a light bit of security around Meshery servers APIs when you deploy Meshery using the local provider. The local provider is also the one that's called none in this drop-down list. And that means that as a user who's deployed Meshery, if you say you don't want to sign into a provider, you want to use no provider, that's fine. Meshery out of the box is a single user tool or a no user tool. And as such, the Meshery's APIs are only lightly protected. And so what Abdullah is doing and what is building upon some work that Ashish has recently done to help people further configure a Meshery deployment to pre-select which provider they would like for that deployment to use. And it's not just about the pre-selection so much as it's about dictating that deployment of Meshery will only allow the chosen provider to be used. And therefore, in that process, that hardens Meshery's APIs. So some of the particulars are, ask Abdullah about it, or ask Ashish Tiwari about it. But so great. So Abdullah is exposing configurability of, these Meshery deployments by ensuring that Meshery's mesh config, the configuration that's used when you're using Meshery CTL, that it has a new property called provider, and that you can specify a provider there. So the next thing that I'm sure that Abdullah will do is, is two things, or rather Abdullah, it's nice to be able for users to configure the provider by Meshery CTL command line. So one way is to create a new noun, Meshery CTL system provider, just like there's Meshery CTL system channel, Meshery CTL system context. That could be done. Or one of the things I think you were thinking about is that you could do, and by the way, while we're saying this, if you bring up Meshery's docs, the Meshery CLI command reference, that might help. Sure, this one works. This is a spreadsheet full of the various commands and their subcommands and their flags and how they've been tested. There's also a CLI reference in Meshery docs as well, but either way. So either a new subcommand could be added or just a flag that lets people set that provider. Anyone can go edit mesh config directly. Yeah.
I was thinking of adding a flag to the create command where you could specify the provider type. That's what I was thinking of doing. So currently, you can set the platform, you can set the adapters to a flag. So I was thinking you can have like a provider flag, like a -p flag, and you could set the provider through that. This is under a Meshery CTL system context.
Nice, yeah. The -p it isn't listed here, but actually, if you have the ability to add it or comment that where it says create platform, there should be a comma p, because you can just specify -p for platform. So if you expose provider, you'll have to choose a different letter. But yeah, that makes sense. What you said. Anybody else have questions or comments, feedback? Does anyone think that it's worthwhile to create a Meshery CTL system provider? There might be better things to spend time on. Abdullah and I talked about it ad nauseum and just kind of described its purpose and how people would use it. Very similar to some of the other, like the system context, the system channel, those commands. It might be better to spend time somewhere else. One thing maybe to ask you, Abdullah, and the rest of the folks on the call is to say that inside of mesh config, so if you go back to the original YAML that you shared in your terminal, which is your mesh config, if you show that again, Abdullah, that would help as I go to.
Yeah.
Nice. So mesh, just like kubectl, you can use kubectl as a command line to interface with multiple Kubernetes clusters. When you want to connect to those different clusters, you might have different credentials to speak to them. They might also, outside of just credentials, they're sitting, that you address them differently. So they're at a different location and they're configured differently. They have different number of nodes and etc. Same thing for Meshery CTL. You can use Meshery CTL to manage multiple Meshery server deployments, multiple Meshery deployments. You might use the same token that's on line 21 to the same credential to speak to them all, or different tokens to speak to different ones. And so what I wanted to ask Abdullah, if you hadn't considered this already, is, so there's this difference between properties of a Meshery deployment, which you can see on like lines 5 through 15 or what have you, or 5 through 19. Those that configuration is specific to that particular Meshery deployment. Whereas tokens is a configuration property that's global, if you will. So the same token could be used across multiple. And so I thought I don't know if you had explicitly considered this, but like that, is that provider setting local to?
It is local. Yes, it is local to a specific context, because currently how it is implemented is like it reads the config and it sets this as an environment variable in the Meshery container. So the implementation of where it reads the environment variable and enforces the provider, it was already done by Ashish. So I just built it built on top of that. It just reads the config and it sets that environment variable, and the logic for actually using the environment variable to enforce the provider was done by Ashish. So if it were to use an because it uses an environment variable, it is local to a specific Meshery deployment.
Oh, hey, I think this is what Ashish was saying a moment ago, and I just now saw it. Where it says remote, we would expect that to receive the actual name of the provider. I think that's what Ashish was getting to. So it would say either none, or it would say Meshery, or it would say SMI conformance, or so yeah.
Okay. So regarding that,
Abdullah, let's I've taken up too much of the time. Let's follow up on those questions. And I explained this last time we spoke about how you can start very simply by not allowing users to look up what the providers are, or if you create a provider subcommand, then you can have it Meshery CTL query Meshery server and ask what providers are available, and then you can list it here. But I just realized we're about a third of the way through the meeting, and we should.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can take this up later.
That's nice. It's great.
Yeah, thank you, Abdullah. So let me share again. So moving to next topic by Antoinette. I don't think Antoinette is with us today. So she had sent a message. So she's working on migrating to use Meshkit logging instead of calling Logrest directly. So you can see her progress in Slack or on GitHub. So next up we have is discussion on messaging framework proposal by Ashish or Abhi.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Okay. So just to give a little bit of context on what this messaging framework is, we have a notification center on Meshery's UI. So if you go to Meshery's UI, you'll find on the top right hand side, I don't have the server running right now, but if I open Playground, here you have a notification center which streams back a bunch of notifications. And these notifications are the result of certain events that are propagated from Meshery server to the clients, which client can be Meshery CTL or the client can be Meshery UI. And these events have a particular format. They used to have a particular format before 3 months ago, and recently some changes were made to add things like probable cause. So in cases of errors, you would also get Meshkit errors. So Meshkit error code such as probable cause, suggested remediation, and it would be a bit more verbose errors. And the warnings would be better. The success messages would be better. So those things were added, but still, it kind of diverged from the initial specification that was the discussion that was happening in the original document about the messaging framework, and also from the Act Cloud event spec, from which it was a little bit inspired, because they've already thought about a lot of things, a lot of considerations they've already made. So building upon that is pretty easier than to start from scratch with an empty whiteboard. So recently, one of the concerns that we had was that certain events like this, like the save of a design, I don't have mesh map open, but I can do it on Playground. So if I open mesh map and I try to, like, let's say I load a component from here. Let's say I take an application, and as this application is loaded right now, there are some issues in the Playground environment. This is still in work in progress. That's why you're not getting these notifications here. Otherwise, what you would see if you run Meshy server right now, using Meshy CTL or using on your local machine or any other way, that whenever you make any change to this application over here, you would get a bunch of logs, notifications telling you that this was saved, which is continuous. And those things are a good those events, the events like save, are good place, are good events to be in something like an audit log, but not something like a notification, because notifying user on every move is kind of annoying, and that results in around 50 to 60 notifications over here. I sort of ran my Meshy server, but if you'll give me time, I'll do that, but I think I should just explain it. But yeah, that happens, and you get around 50, 60 notifications from over here. So the idea was that to consolidate this messaging framework documentation to change the current structure that we have, that can not only basically solve the current problem of showing notifications, when to show notifications, when not to, but a kind of a structure that adheres somewhat to the original specification, the cloud event specification, and also has Meshery specific considerations. So by going over, in the first iteration of this document, there were certain things proposed, like for example, it had to have a so it had to have a type, ID, source, spec version, and these things were directly derived from the cloud events, which actually did make sense. But later down the line, at the time of implementation, those were dropped, and component type and component things like component type and component name were introduced, which are not part of the spec, and they're kind of confusing as well. And things like severity, short description, long description of errors were taken out of the data block, which actually is specified in the specification. So instead of it will take me like around 15 minutes if I go over the entire spec and if I go over the cloud events thing. So I'll just directly go over the current proposal that I have, and so that what changes we need to do in that proposal. So the current proposal, these fields are straight from the cloud event spec. So this will have a spec version so that the client can know which spec of cloud events the incoming event adheres to. Then it will have an ID. This ID will be unique. This ID will be unique per source per event. So if for a single source, identical two events of same IDs are received, they can be called as duplicates. And then the difference here is that a new field is introduced, which is so basically type and data content type are differentiated. So type would be so type field, we don't have type right now. Actually we do have, but that's not really type. The specification that the cloud event specifies actually does make more sense than our current implementation, which is to have a field known as data content type. And this data content type can be things like error, info, like you have log severity levels. In the same way, you can have a data content type such as error, info, warning, debug, and so on and so forth. And based upon whatever data content type is provided over here, the data block is parsed on the basis of that. So if it was like error, then we would go and try to find error in the data. If there was like info or let's say debug, in that case you wouldn't find error. And things like fields like message, summary, and details are ubiquitous for all kinds of data. And this allows us to extend not only so as we like plug in more and more things into Meshery, tomorrow we might have external integrations which also propagate events that might not adhere to a predefined type. So data can be and just a JSON blob for some particular event. So in that case, it can be application/JSON, and that is also described by the cloud event spec as well. And so there can be predefined types like error, info, and warning. And for those things, there would be these fields like message, summary, details inside of the data blob instead of being outside the data blob, which it is right now. So that the data blob is specific to the data content type. And so coming back to the type field, so for example, if you try to provision a service mesh, let's say in that case that the type field would be, and let's say you're trying to provision Istio service mesh, a type field specified in in this specification follows this convention of reversing the global identifier format we have, like the domain format. So for example, inside of Istio, there can be multiple types. So there you can have provisioning, and then it can be followed by dot, depending upon what type of things that can be provisioned after that. So type would be the type of an event, the type of an event can be istio.provisioning, linkerd.provisioning, istio.management. These can be the type, and the data content type would be what kind of data is packaged in that. So for example, if you try to provision and it resulted in an error, so data content type would be error, and then on the basis of that, this data would be unmarshaled. And coming to the second example, for the use case that I specified previously, the save of a design, for in that case, the type would be core.design.save. Core because it is Meshery server is doing it, .design because inside of Meshery server you have something called as a design, and inside of design you have .save, or let's say .update, depending upon what that operation is. And then let's say that it corresponds to a save. In that case, we don't want to have an info error warning, because if we expected a save and the save happened, in most so in terminal we have we allow debug mode in that cases when we have to have extraneous logs. So in that case, due to that, these events would be of type debug. This will allow the UI or the client to filter things on the basis of data content type. So for notifications, it can filter all the types such as info, warning, and error, and debug logs can be found in. So there would be an audit log where according to timestamp, you will find all the events, and there you will find all the events, no matter whether they are debug, whether they are info, whether they are warning or whatever. But this data content type debug wouldn't be shown at the notification. And again, the source here would be core, and this source will also follow the format defined by the cloud events, so that this source can be, for example, in my previous example, it was /adapter/istio. Here it can be /core. And the reason for there to be slash is that it can be an external URL as well. So for example, we will do a lot of GitOps things. So when something like something happened in your Git repository, an update happened in your Git repo, some commit happened, and that triggered something. In that case, the type would be github.pull-request.something, and the source would be the actual URI of that whole thing, that from this remote repository, actually this event got propagated. So they define it that way. So it is, and it does make sense to have that source in this format, so that we can have this as a relative internal to our system thing, and also as a URI or a URM thing. So this is, and time is, and okay, last thing that I missed was correlation ID. So because all events are propagated from something like an operation, a policy or something, and in those tables, this would be a foreign ID to those tables. So if you take an event, you can go back and see what operation actually propagated this thing. So when you, right now in Meshery, when you use meshops v1, which is a simpler method to deploy service mesh, you just do it with a click of a button, or you do it using designer by designing your things, which is meshops v2. In both of the cases, that is an operation. An operation is uniquely identified using operation ID, and that single operation might result in multiple events. So you can go back to any event and trace back what operation caused that event. And this correlation ID is also given in the original spec. Most of the fields are in the original spec, and that's why they're here. And I think I've talked about all these points. UI can filter on the basis of data content type. Message summary and details will be common set of data fields for all predefined data types, like info, warn, debug, and error. And correlation ID will be a GeoID, and it will uniquely identify an operation. And the type would be an event type, contains it will contain metadata of the event, carrying info that can be used later for filtering by the client. Source can be URI, URN. ID should be unique per source. Events that with the same ID and source will be considered duplicate. So yeah, that kind of summarizes what I was proposing over here. And this is like, again, a consolidation of everything that is above this spec, and this spec has to be actually because a lot of things are spread out. So for example, there is this older screenshot over here, which is which describes something, and then there is another format which describes then there is another code block which describes a different format. So basically multiple discussions resulted in multiple descriptions of what an event can look like, and originally it started from this spec. So what I did was I just went to this spec, and I went to this original doc and figured out what are the things that we are trying to do, what's our current format, and what would be the format that we would like to get to.
Let me interject with a question. Lots of details, which is nice, but probably too many details for most of us. It's probably hard to to follow all that. All those of us that can follow all of that don't need it explained, and then those of us that can't, it's just like too many details. But it's nice to see that this is happening in the .7 release. Questions? Is there any? Oh gosh, are we using cloud event spec as is, or are we augmenting that?
We are using as is.
We're compatible. Okay, that's
We are
good.
compatible. Yeah.
Is there a difference? So in terms of the notes that you have there at the bottom, it says that there'll be an ID. Wait, the second to bottom, the source can be. Okay, wait. I think I just answered my own question. So the correlation ID and the ID should be unique per source. That last note that you have, that's just a qualification of what the correlation ID is. Is that right?
The last point is not about correlation IDs. It's just about the ID of the event. And it is defined in this original cloud event specification as well, that it should be unique per source.
And how is that distinct from the correlation ID?
Correlation ID is the ID of the operation, not the ID of the event. So when the operation will send that event, it will take its primary ID and then put it into the correlation ID so that we can identify which operation triggered this event.
Makes a lot of sense. Nice. Good. Is there, of the proposal that you have currently, while this document that we're looking at, this design spec, is exactly what you'd said, with like a collection of different, it needs to be massaged and sort of rewritten to gel, to flow. But of the proposal that you have here, is there any refactoring that would need to be done inside of the Meshkit errors implementation?
No.
I see.
The only refactoring that would happen is in the proto file that defines the message event format. Only there.
Do other people have comments here? So in essence, what Ashish is highlighting is that Meshery is comprised of any number of different components, different subsystems. There's a link in the Zoom chat to Meshery's architecture, which highlights those different components, and hopefully they're all well described. I know Paul Ara is looking that over and is going to add to Meshery documentation if he finds anything missing. Right, Paul? And that it's important that each of those components are able to exchange event to one another and track all that. So that's the gist of what Ashish is going. So he's enhancing that so that in Meshery's UI, the notification center, it will become used a lot more information will be shown back to the user. If you've ever told Meshery to stand up a service mesh, and then you kind of sit around waiting and wondering what's going on, this work lays part of the foundation to help show back those operations to the user.
Okay, and what this lacks right now is the proposal for the database schema. So right now this is stateless. We don't persist. We don't have an operations table or an events table, and that would be the next step. So that would require another discussion. But yeah, just clarifying what are the parts that are left. Anyone else have any other questions?
Yeah, so I have a consideration. If you so the data content type would contain the severity level, right?
Yeah.
So if you follow my cursor or scroll down, so this is a severity level written here. So I see in most of the conditions when we have panic situations, if you see value 0, just on the top, value 0, yeah, this one. So in case of emergency or panic, when server just panics, you don't have any context when you are using the UI itself, that something wrong has been done, and your server is now in a panic condition, and it's not usable right now because it has just stopped itself. So can we also, catch the panic events and get the, because when you go to that go to that go to the server logs, in most of the situations maybe the server logs won't be easily accessible by the user, and they would have to go do some external operations, logging into the Docker container or whatever it can be. So can we just use this, can we incorporate this severity level also in case of emergency, when your server stopped and no operation can be done and system is in unstable state, and you are getting it as a notification event inside the notification center also, with the probable cause and what's the error and everything related. And
Actually, yeah, I get what you're asking for, but that can be a bit tricky, because usually when panic, we can have certain sort of panic handling, but uh, hmm, hmm. Yeah, but there are so many ways in which the panic can take place, that yeah, it would be pretty hard to make sure that we are able to propagate the event before the crash. Uh, yeah, because
so
the
just
event will
after the
be,
panic, the server stops itself,
yeah,
and the events are propagated within a TCP connection, like HTTP connection, right? So
so
because the server
yeah,
stops,
what,
the HTTP connection would already have stopped. That's what your point is, right?
yeah. Yep. I can, like, in the main routine, there can be a differ function that can be added in cases of that. But yeah, I'll have to actually experiment with that to see if that actually will, because if the underlying, yeah, I'll have to see before I answer this question.
Time check.
Okay. So just a quick next item would be,
So let's, I moved it down.
okay. I thought I was going, I had to show the dark mode. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Ashish and Abhi. So I think we have Nitish join on the call. So Nitish would like to quickly go over your item if you are ready with your item.
He was asking for just another minute. So maybe
Oh.
you can.
Yeah, we can go over to Harshit's item, dark mode on Meshery UI.
Yeah, so yeah, hello everyone. So yeah, this is the dark mode of the Meshery, and I mean this PR is under review, and it's it's completed from my side. I mean, I double checked some of the components, but maybe there are some things here that you can check it out and just review it, and just you can suggest every element, every component you want. So so this is under also a review, so I request everyone to just check out this PR and also review it, and just suggest some good issues. Also, yeah, we have also, I posted a docs here in which some already found issues are written. So these are the issues that already being addressed. So please also consider this while reviewing this dark mode. And uh, yeah, it's a good non-code contribution you can do here. If you are not able to understand the the long code basis, so it's a good thing and a very easy thing that every beginner can do. So yeah, please check this out, and let's just merge this. So yeah.
Where can
Yeah,
people find the
that's
list of known issues? Push it.
Yeah,
If they're gonna.
yeah. Okay, what? Pardon, please.
Oh yeah. As people go to offer review, if there are known issues already, where can they see that list so they don't offer duplicative review?
There's a docs here in the PR itself. You can just check this out and just see the already existing issues.
Can you merge this doc in the one you originally created? for the dark mode, so that it is all concentrated at one place.
Okay, okay, okay. I will then merge it then. Okay, yeah, and one more thing to access the dark mode. Yeah, here's the thing: you can have to click on your profile, and you can see that here. I mean, if you see trouble somewhere. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, looking great. Thank you, Ashit. So let's move to Nitish's topic.
Yeah. Uh, so in mesh map, we have this RCSF form that allows us to configure the components that we see over here. So there has been some problems with the validation. Like it provides us default validation of the configuration for the components. So but there has been some problems with the default validation provided by RCSF, and like it's been a, I mean, like this was we've tried many things, but still we were not able to fix those problems. Like those problems were of the the exact, like one of the core reasons of those problems occurring, like by problems, some of the problems that I mean is that like when you in case, like if you just look at this binding component, when the user tries to opens it and tries to configure something, you can see that like there is nothing wrong by just looking at the form. There is you don't seem to be, I mean, there is nothing immediately wrong about this, but then you see that there's actually an error. But this sort of throws the users off when they just first see this thing. So although this is something that technically, when you look at it, when according to the RJs of validation, this is there is an error in this, and the reason for that is I can show that, like if you open this annotations or any other fields, uh, there will be some field, some deep field which is actually inside that might be a required field. But in this case, like that is not actually on the first level of the tooltip, and it is not exposed to the user. So in those cases, like the RSF doesn't understand the fact that like that particular field is not exposed to the user, and so he doesn't have he doesn't know about that. So it still considers that as an error, and it is showing it. So this is one of such problems. There are some other problems of the same nature. So essentially, when you look into it, like the problem is the fact that RGSF maintains its own state of the form. It's basically the form data. So what it does is that like it basically, like if you have multiple nested levels of objects in the whole form data is actually an object, and it will have multiple nested levels of objects inside them. So whenever you do something, like whenever you first initialize this form, it will basically like fill every value with its null value. So for a string, it will be an empty string, or for a number, it will be 0, or that depends on the implementation details, but still it will fill it with some value. So that means like if you like even if that particular thing, let's say if I take this component as an example, although the user might not have configured service, then still like it would have RGSF would have taken in such a way that like he has actually opened it and he has actually filled a null value into it, which is not actually the case. The user has not been I mean, this has not been exposed to the user. So this is sort of like the core problem which we are facing. So what I did was I actually I actually tried to change the source of truth for validation. So the as I said before, like RGSF was using the form data, the state that it maintains, which as I said, like it has this it has this behavior of filling the default values for all the components that are not even exposed to users. So that changing that was a sort of, I mean, it was not very easy for us, so we had to do. I mean, I don't think like we have been able to succeed in that regard. So the other approach that I took was to change the source of truth for validation, which is to say that like you have the designs, like whenever you change something, you actually have a design that's being persisted everywhere. I mean, this is annoying, but still you can see that like these files are saved by whenever you make a change. So basically, this design file has the configuration of this of each of these components. So whenever you make a change, you'll have that I guess like I can show that. That would be better. Let me do that.
So yeah, like sorry to interrupt Nitish, but yeah, any feedback for Nitish? Like we are running out of time. If you want to
All
show
right. Yeah,
anything.
yeah. Yeah, I'll just wrap it up quickly. It's just that like the approach is to use this the the configuration inside the design file as the source of truth for validation and not using the RGS of form data. So that's yeah, I think I'll be able to make a PR by by tonight, and then like I'll send it for review so you guys can check it out if you want. Yeah, thank you.
Is this PR completed? Like means we can get a right set of balance for the validation, right?
Yeah, we can. It's just I've just confirmed that we will be able to do that. The only thing that's left is to display it to the. I mean, there are two parts to it. One is that you get the final list of errors, and then you display it to the RGS form. So currently I'm actually working on how to make it how to take like basically feed this errors that we are we are validating into RGS so that it will actually display it rather than doing its own thing. So yeah, we'll be able to do this thing, and I'll make a PR and update you.
Thank you, Nitish. So moving on to next topic by Franklin on user management. Franklin, you're up.
Yeah. Hi guys. So I believe you can see my screen. So the idea here is
Franklin, we can't.
Franklin,
can
you
you
are sharing your Slack, not Chrome.
oh sorry about that. Can you see my screen now?
For $4, we
Can you see
can.
my screen?
Yep, we can.
Okay, assuming you can see my screen. All right. Well, we're talking about this yesterday, right? And I said I was going to come up with an approach. I have already created like a migration file and added like a field on the user table for the active section. So for users, just to be able to like activate or deactivate the user, right? And also I was going to ask, aside obviously if a user is deactivated, the user wouldn't be able to log in. I know that should be one of the expected behaviors, but then if there's another behavior, there is like a click up that task link that I'll share with us on the channel, so you can add that there as well. Then for the bulk rules, like for removing the rules and all that, we currently have this. You should be able to remove the rules with this. I think Raj worked on this part, right? But then I now added like a different button. I'm kind of testing it out now, but it will still work, and that would be for like assigning multiple rows at the same time, like bulk assign of rows, right? So let's assume that this button is for assigning rows. If you click on this button, it would, instead of displaying this, and obviously don't mind the interface, it's not clean, I'm kind of modifying and testing out it. Instead of displaying this, you should be able to choose the rows that you would want to assign, like this here, right? So I already started with this. I already started with the activator, the user active part, like to be able to activate a user or deactivate a user. And I should be done with that part today. I've created the database schema. I just added a row to the user table to be able to like, activate or deactivate the user. And then there's this interface. I should write the API probably this night and then connect that. And that should be done. Then I would move on to bulk activation, right? Which is still the same process of clicking this here or selecting certain amount of rows and then clicking a button, which will be displayed up here. You have to still use CSS to like arrange these buttons properly and make them look nice and colors and stuff, right? And yeah, So, and I think this would generally cover everything that has to do with bulk assigning of roles, deactivation of users, or removal of roles in bulk, if that makes sense. So that is the approach. That is the approach I came up with, right? So yeah, everything can be done literally on this table, straight up. Is there any inputs?
Yeah, you might think about, so by the way, for everybody here, the user admin UI that Franklin is showing, this is inside of Meshery Cloud. So this is one of those remote providers. And so Franklin, you might think about passwords to the extent that maybe a user needs a password administratively reset. And so maybe that would be a function. I think that there might be a quick clarification on active versus a user that has verified their email address. And those two things might be getting mixed up. And so if a user has verified their email, that's great. And that's a user-based activity that only they can do. It might be nice to be able to see that they have verified. And I wonder if that isn't what you mean by active, or do you mean?
Okay, go ahead.
Or maybe you're hinting at whether or not the account is disabled or enabled, like that.
Yes, this is when discussing with Richard, these are the list of tasks that I'm following, right? So you have this, allow admin to activate a user, and then bulk user, inactivation. So I think it's the same as enabling or disabling a user, like disabling the account permanently. If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So yeah, that is basically the approach for solving this. So I'm already working on it, and yeah, it's progressing quite well.
Yeah, thank you, Franklin. So we have 3 minutes left. So next topic is by Pranav. So Pranav would like to cover the items.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. So a very quick context of the first item which I have is about a bug on the dashboard. Meshery as a cloud native multi-Kubernetes manager helps a lot in channelizing different things running in your environment. So it has its own dashboard, one of which, like this dashboard helps in giving an overview of different things running in your environment. So like the bug was that whenever you connect to a Kubernetes cluster, it determines the number of different workloads running in a system, and it gives you an overview over this place. But the thing was that it was not counting the right number of resources because the Kubernetes cluster ID was not being passed to the backend. So there was a very small fix for it in which we need to dereference the right property. So I fix it in this thing, and this PR is already merged. The second problem was that about
Yeah, I think Pranav voice got lost. So yeah, I'll just quickly cover the item. So it was about making the catalog user toggling as a user preference. So yeah, previously we were having on the catalog toggle set to user preference only in the settings. Now we can set the catalog to user preference in extensions page as well as from the eye icon in Meshery UI in designs page. So Pranav, if you could, yeah.
So the problem here was just that we were not giving the right priorities based on the preferences saved in the remote provider. So the problem was the fix by adding the right set of APIs calls based on when a component loads. Now everything is in sync. For example, if I click on this, it will be saved. That is, we don't want to see catalog items for now. And the same thing would be true in the filters page. And this takes it. It's disabled, and the same thing would be true over here. It's just loading, and the same thing would be true over here, which is our preferences. So everything is in sync now. And if I click on it, so again, everything will come back to sync. That everything would be turned on. So wherever you go for a specific thing which uses that item, you'll see the public items. So yeah, that is also fixed. So we have these two fixes in place. Any questions?
I guess not. Yeah. Oh.
I'd be curious to hear more about some of your, some of how if you find any other multi-cluster issues. And so, yeah, there are two issues that come to mind. One is the deployment of Meshery operator doesn't seem to always be happening. And the second one is, that little duck, it had me, that little avatar has me losing my train of thought.
It's a dummy account actually. So.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Wow, it doesn't take much to make me lose my train of thought. The other one is with respect to when you have a Meshery deployment and you connect it to multiple Kubernetes clusters, there is some undone work here on the selections. The selections aren't always remembered across pages or even on the same page. The selections in the context switcher. Also on the settings page under environment, the status, ABI, isn't accurately represented between the green. If you hover on the chip right there, on the playground chip, and it'll tell you, yeah, if you hover on it, tell you status. But if you look over here, they don't always match, particularly when you have more than one cluster connected. So
actually, I also figured that out. I wanted to send the screenshot. Like I get connected to 3 clusters in which operator wasn't actually connected, but in the context selector, it shows that it's connected. So it's probably a bug.
Yeah, I'm aware of this issue. Actually, because there is some inconsistency in the operator. Like I've been answering the same question with the same answer again and again without going to a fix. So probably I'll come on and fix this issue rather than talk about why it's happening right now. So
Yeah, thank you, Pranav and Abhi. So we are 3 minutes over. So before ending the call, I would like to make a note that please do press this big fat yellow icon to join every other Layer 5's community meeting. And if you have any kind of questions or queries, feel free to grab an account on Discuss and post your questions over here. So I think we are done for today, I guess. Anyone has questions or anything they would like to discuss or say?
Yeah, just
okay,
a quick comment. As I look over the list of names of people that are here, almost everybody is involved somewhere and is largely in why they're here. If you don't have something that you can call your own or something that you're working on, but that you would like to, and you don't have to be, you're welcome just to hang out. But if you would like to and you don't have something, we can fix that. We can get you something. So cool. The Gaurav, thank you so much for hosting the call. It was a great meeting today. Lots of demos and stuff. So very nice to see you all.
Thank you all for joining. We'll meet next week. Bye.
Bye.